I was reminiscing with my father recently about our old family friend who passed away a few months ago. We always called him Uncle, even though he wasn't related by blood. They were engineering students together back in university, and my father shared this incredible story about how they dealt with an entitled vandal. It was during their third year of engineering. My father and uncle were known for being the practical jokers of their class, but they were also brilliant when it came to solving real-world problems. That's probably why their engineering professor's request caught their attention immediately. The professor walked into class one day looking frustrated. He explained to the class that he had a problem that needed solving, and he was willing to offer extra credit to anyone who could help. He went on to tell them about someone in a red truck who had been destroying his mailbox every night. He and his wife had replaced it 4 times already, and each time the vandal would return to knock it down again. The professor explained that he needed a mailbox that was truck-proof, met city regulations, and cost no more than $20 to make. Now, $20 back then was worth quite a bit more than it is today. But my father and uncle saw this as more than just an assignment. It was a challenge. I asked my father what he and uncle did about it. He explained that they first went hunting for materials. They found this perfect steel bar that fit all the city regulations for mailbox posts. He mentioned there were strict rules about height, width, and all that. I could see my father grinning as he continued the story. He described how they got creative filling that steel bar with concrete and steel rebars. But that wasn't enough. They welded 8 more rebars to the sides, bent them in half, and stuck the whole thing in a bucket. When I asked about the bucket, he explained that they filled it with the heaviest rocks they could find. The finishing touch was painting it to look like wood and attaching this absolutely hideous mailbox they found on sale. They welded that down too, just to be thorough. According to my father, when they brought their creation to class, it was so heavy they could barely move it. They were the first group to finish, so the professor agreed to install it right away. My father told me that the professor called them the next morning, laughing so hard he could barely speak. The professor described how around midnight he and his wife were awakened by this massive metallic bang, followed by someone screaming profanities. When they looked outside, they saw that red truck speeding away, and there at the base of their still-standing mailbox was a broken wooden baseball bat. But the story gets better. 2 days later, the professor received a hospital bill in his mail. The passenger who had tried to hit the mailbox had seriously injured his arm and shoulder. The entitled vandals actually had the nerve to try and sue the professor. When the professor told them about the lawsuit, my father and uncle were worried at first, but the professor wasn't concerned at all. He hired a lawyer who had the perfect response to the lawsuit. The lawyer simply asked if they were willing to testify in court that they were repeatedly vandalizing this man's property. The lawsuit was dropped immediately. Those entitled vandals couldn't admit to their crimes without incriminating themselves. According to my father, that mailbox became somewhat of a legend in their university town. Their professor was so impressed that he shared the story with his colleagues, and soon other professors were requesting similar mailboxes. My father and uncle ended up making several more, and from what he's heard, they're all still standing today. When I asked if the original one was still there, my father told me that the last time he drove by the old professor's house, that ugly mailbox was still standing proud. It must be going on 30 years now. Thinking about it now, I wish I could have thanked Uncle for leaving behind such a great story. He and my father didn't just solve a problem. They created something that would outlast even them, and they managed to give some entitled vandals exactly what they deserved. I've been living with multiple sclerosis for about 10 years now. It's changed my life in ways I never expected. Before my diagnosis, I was a physical education teacher, always active and on my feet. The transition to using a wheelchair wasn't easy, but I've managed to adapt. These days, I work as an online fitness coach, specializing in adaptive exercises for people with mobility issues. It feels good to still help others stay active, even if it's not in the way I originally planned. My condition comes with its challenges: constant pain, fatigue that hits like a truck, and muscles that sometimes just decide not to cooperate. but I've built a good life despite it all. I have my own apartment, a job I love, and people who care about me. I've learned to navigate the world differently, but I still navigate it on my own terms. Last week, I needed to do my regular grocery run. I drove to the store I always shop at, parked in my usual handicapped spot, and headed inside. Everything was going fine until I finished checking out and started making my way back to my car. That's when I heard her. She yelled at me about the parking spot, claiming it was hers. I turned my wheelchair around to face a woman who looked to be in her 50s, handbag clutched in her manicured hands. When I explained that I had a handicapped permit for the spot, she scoffed. She went on a rant about how I was too young to be disabled and accused me of using the wheelchair just to get special treatment. I tried explaining that I had multiple sclerosis and the spot was legally mine to use. She dismissed my condition entirely, questioning what multiple sclerosis even was. She insisted that she knew what real disabilities looked like, and according to her, I didn't look sick at all. She called me lazy. I told her I didn't need to prove my disability to her, and pointed out that the permit on my car was all the proof required. She threatened to call both the store manager and the police, accusing me of taking advantage of spots meant for what she called actual disabled people. She stormed off but returned minutes later with 3 other women, all looking like they'd just left a country club brunch. One of her friends started accusing me of being a scammer who was pretending to need a wheelchair. Another one chimed in about how people like me made her sick, claiming I was taking advantage of the system. They surrounded my wheelchair, jeering and cursing. One of them even grabbed my chair and started shaking it. I tried to keep my composure, but I was terrified. Then suddenly, a deep voice cut through their taunting. A tall man in a leather jacket demanded to know what they thought they were doing. His girlfriend was right behind him. Before I could process what was happening, he pulled out a handgun. He ordered them all to get on their knees immediately. The women froze in place. He commanded them to apologize to me right away and then start running. He warned them that he would count to 10, and if they were still there when he finished, there would be problems. Karen quickly stammered out an apology, saying they were leaving. They scrambled away as fast as their heels could carry them. The man put his gun away and helped me straighten my wheelchair. His girlfriend asked if I was okay and whether I needed them to call anyone. I assured them I was fine and thanked them both for helping me. The man told me that nobody deserves to be treated like that and told me to take care of myself. They left as quickly as they'd appeared. Later I found out through local gossip that the man was actually a high-ranking member of a notorious motorcycle club in our area. I'm not one to condone violence or weapons, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't grateful for his intervention that day. I still shop at that store, but I haven't seen Karen or her friends since. Something tells me they found a different grocery store to harass people at, though I doubt they'll be questioning anyone's disability status anytime soon. I grew up in what you'd call the rougher side of town. My family wasn't well off, but we made do with what we had. Our house was nothing special, but it was home. Most of our neighbors were either working-class folks trying to make ends meet or elderly people who'd been there since before the neighborhood went downhill. The real trouble started with the duplex across the alley behind our house. The alley itself was already a problem spot. Someone even managed to steal our massive trampoline one night. I still remember my father's face when he discovered it was gone. The thing was completely rusted together, so whoever took it must have turned it on its side and rolled it away like some giant wheel. But that was nothing compared to what came next. The landlord of that duplex would rent to absolutely anyone who could pay. He didn't care who they were or what they did, as long as the money came in on time. That's how we ended up with a drug dealer living right across from us. This wasn't your typical discreet operation either. The guy ran what was basically a drive-through drug service right out of his kitchen window. Cars would pull up through the alley into his yard. Hands would exchange stuff through the window and they'd drive off. Simple as that. My mother would constantly find needles in our yard and tell my father about it. It was happening more and more frequently, sometimes multiple times a week. She was especially worried about me getting hurt. She had good reason to be concerned. Before a car accident left her disabled, my mother worked as a nurse. She'd been infected with hepatitis C from a needle stick at work, so she knew firsthand how dangerous these things could be. Plus, there were other kids in the neighborhood too. My father tried talking to the landlord first. He showed him evidence of the drug dealing and told him about the dangerous items we kept finding in our yard. The landlord just brushed him off, saying it wasn't his problem since he didn't live there. When my father mentioned the children's safety, the landlord just told him to take it up with the police. So they did. But the police weren't much help either. They told my parents they couldn't investigate based on someone's word alone. When my father described the constant traffic and drug paraphernalia, they just suggested writing down license plate numbers, saying they'd only look into it if any matched known felons. My mother spent an entire day hidden, by the window, writing down every plate she could see. Over 100 cars came through. That's how busy this operation was. They sent the list to the police department, but weeks went by with no response. When they finally called back, they just said there were no matches found. Things only got worse after that. More needles, more broken pipes, more burned spoons showing up in our yard. That's when my father decided enough was enough. One moonless night, he snuck out with bags of roofing nails he'd bought, brown ones that would blend in perfectly with the dirt and gravel driveway. He scattered hundreds of them all over their parking area. The next few weeks were like a comedy show. Car after car would pull up, and within minutes, you'd hear cursing and see people changing flat tires. Because the driveway was just dirt and gravel with patches of grass, the nails were practically invisible. Business started dropping off pretty quickly. After that, either they couldn't handle losing so many customers, or they figured out someone was sabotaging them. Either way, one night, they just disappeared. The landlord had to spend over 2 weeks cleaning up after them. They completely trashed the place before leaving, stripped it bare, and filled it with garbage. I remember hearing the landlord complaining loudly about the damage while the cleaning crews hauled out mountains of trash day after day. My father would just watch silently from our yard, probably thinking about how the landlord might care more about who he rented to next time. The landlord started doing actual background checks on his tenants after that. Funny how some well-placed nails can change someone's rental policies. My father served in the United States Navy, which meant we moved around constantly. Being the perpetual new kid made me an easy target for bullies, and over time I became pretty introverted and wary of others. When my dad finally decided to settle down in his hometown for recruiting duty before retirement, I thought things might get better. We moved to the family farm that my great-grandfather had built, but small-town life brought its own challenges. If you've never lived in a small town, let me tell you, they don't exactly roll out the welcome wagon for outsiders. Unless you were born and raised there, you might as well be from another planet. I tried to keep to myself, but trouble had a way of finding me. Most of the kids eventually grew out of their bullying phase, especially after they discovered my family's connection to the town's founding. But not this one guy. Let's just call him the stalker, because that's basically what he became. Every single day this guy would seek me out just to tell me how worthless I was. He'd call me a dumb farm boy who'd never amount to anything. He'd randomly come up to me and say things like, "I know you're going to shoot up the school someday, and when you kill yourself, I'll be the one cheering." Real psycho stuff. Once, I even found my locker combination painted on with toothpaste. By senior year, I was doing my best to ignore him. This seemed to drive him even crazier, and even his own friends started telling him he was being obsessive. Then suddenly the verbal abuse stopped. It started with our mailbox. One morning I walked down our long driveway to catch the bus and found it completely destroyed, run over by a vehicle. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was just some drunk driver. I took photos of the damage, fixed it up with a new wooden post, and went about my day. But the next morning, same thing. And the next day, yep, destroyed again. This went on for 2 straight weeks, only stopping on weekends. My parents reported it, but without proof of who did it, the police couldn't do anything. That's when I decided enough was enough. One Saturday morning, I got up early and went to work. I dug a 2-foot wide hole 6 feet deep and filled it with fresh cement. In the center, I placed a 10-foot section of cast iron water pipe from the old farmhouse, sinking it 6 feet into the concrete. I even filled the pipe itself with concrete. After making sure it was the legal distance from the road and covered in reflectors, I mounted the mailbox on top. Monday morning came and I noticed some scratches on the post, but it was still standing proud. During my last class of the day, one of the stalker's friends burst in. He demanded to know what I'd done to his friend's car. When I told him I hadn't done anything and didn't even know what car he drove, he got even angrier. He yelled about how my mailbox had totaled the car and they'd needed a tow truck at 5 in the morning. That's when I told him about mailbox vandalism being a federal crime. He looked confused, so I explained that mailboxes legally belong to the post office, making it destruction of government property. He brushed it off, saying his friend would just get a small fine, but I'd have to pay for the car. I had to break down the reality for him. Each offense carried a $250,000 fine or up to 3 years in prison. With 10 incidents in 2 weeks, that meant either a $2.5 million fine or up to 30 years in prison. The stalker himself came bursting in right after that. When he accused me of making it all up, I simply showed him the federal statute on my computer. I explained that while I might have to pay a fine and remove the mailbox if he took me to court, the consequences for him would be life-changing. He tried to argue that I could improve all 10 incidents, but I reminded him about the photos I'd taken of every single one. I pointed out that even a single incident's fine would be far more than his car was worth and asked if he really wanted to risk prison or bankruptcy just to make me pay for his car damage. He stormed out and never bothered me again. But the story doesn't end there. The guy didn't have enough credits to graduate on time, and the school moved him to adult education programs. Without a car, his mother refused to buy him another one after finding out how he totaled the first one. He couldn't get to his classes. He eventually got kicked out due to poor attendance. He never got his diploma or GED, couldn't get into college, and couldn't find decent work. He ended up living in his mother's trailer, surviving on odd jobs here and there. Meanwhile, I moved to the beautiful Algarve region in southern Portugal, where I live with my spouse and child. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about that mailbox and how it changed his life.